Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, How Auditing Can Drive Performance in Applied Epic. Applied Epic is an immense program, one that can be very daunting for an agency, no matter if you've just migrated or have been implemented for years. We believe it's important that agencies get the most out of their investment, so we are very excited that you are taking the time with us today. Our main presenter today is Lauren Tripp. Lauren is a senior agency consultant here at Kite Tech, who leads projects for Applied Epic optimization. She also provides employee training, workflow development, performs data and procedural audits, and assists with Applied Epic migrations. Lauren shares her knowledge of Epic by actively presenting at national and regional Applied Client Network meetings throughout the year, so you may recognize her from one of her previous presentations. And I am Kelly Yulhorn. My primary focus at Kite Tech is performing data and procedural audits for our clients. I also assist with workflow development, commission entry, data testing, and other various consulting projects. For those of you who may not be familiar with Kite Technology, we are a full-service IT and consulting firm specializing in servicing independent insurance agencies nationwide. Something that sets Kite Tech apart from other IT and consulting companies is our expertise with insurance. Many of our staff have previous backgrounds within the industry, giving us that extra insight on what an agency needs for optimal efficiency and performance. Our goal is to provide comprehensive technology management and consulting in order to help agencies improve their business performance and operate more effectively. Our IT services include infrastructure management, security and compliance, help desk support, and cloud adoption strategies. Our consulting services include Applied Epic migrations, Epic optimization, auditing, and employee training. Kite Tech has been around for more than 28 years, and today we are proud to support more than 3,000 end users across the United States. So let's review our objectives for today's presentation. Today we will understand what information to audit and why. We are going to learn what reports to use to audit your data. We will review examples of data audit questions. We're going to learn how to analyze and evaluate the results of your audits, and then we'll learn additional ways to use data audits and reports. So with that, I'm going to give the presentation over to Lauren. Lauren, why should we audit?
Great. Thank you so much for that, Kelly. So today we're going to start out with talking about why you should audit your data. So a couple of points I'd like to point out are going to be based around your information in Epic. First off, of course, you need to focus on accurate reporting. So, obviously the information going into Epic is going to be generated in reports. So if you don't have accurate information going into the system, then obviously you're not going to be able to report accurately, whether it be on commissions or book of business reports. Several various reports are going to be affected by the information that's being input into your system. Also, a lot of agencies are interested in standardizing their workflows. So once you have decided to migrate to Epic, or maybe you've been on Epic for a little while, you could have a situation where everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and you really want to standardize those workflows and make sure that everybody's doing things consistently and improving efficiency in your agency by standardizing those workflows. Other situations that may require some auditing could be data cleanup when you have migrated to Epic. A lot of times there's information that is going to be needed to be cleaned up post-migration. Obviously, Epic has and Applied has several reports and things to help you clean up that information prior to migration. And there's also various scripts, but one thing that you can do post-migration is review the reports that they've given you and actively review that data to make sure that it's being properly cleaned up. Another situation that we have seen lately is that some of the errors and omissions insurers are actively requesting that you audit your data. Obviously they want to make sure that you're doing what you're doing so that properly, so that they have a quality risk that they're insuring. So it's also very important, not only for you to have accurate information for E&O purposes, but also for the purpose of your E&O carrier. Another situation that assists you in when you're auditing data in the system is going to be balancing the workloads. So often when you are auditing your information in the system, you'll find that there may be an imbalance of workloads and possibility to even some of that workload out between your account managers in your agency. Obviously, you may also want to identify training opportunities if you have standardized workflows, whether they've been in place for a while or whether you've recently implemented workflows. Uh, by auditing your data, you'll find what opportunities you have to train and make your employees more efficient and enhance the performance of your agencies. And of course, you also have performance reviews that may happen maybe once a year or possibly on a quarterly basis. You can also utilize this information to assist in presenting those performance reviews to your employees. You can kind of gauge whether or not they are actively following procedures and standard workflows, improving their efficiency in the agency. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what methods there are for auditing. So a couple of different ways that you can do audits for your agency will be monitoring through reports, and we'll go through a few of the reports that are available in the system today, and how you can manipulate those reports to get the data that you need. You can also conduct internal audits. So if you have the resources within your agency, you can audit in a couple of different ways there. You may decide to have a manager, maybe a team leader, audit the information that is being processed by your servicing folks. You may have a situation where you have a good dynamic in the agency. If there's a good, level of trust and a good dynamic, then you may be able to have a peer-to-peer auditing situation. So obviously, if there's any concern there, you wouldn't want to have, my buddy auditing my information if there's any concern there. But if you have a good dynamic, you have a good level of trust in the agency, you can certainly do peer-to-peer audits as well. You may also choose to outsource auditing. There are several different options for outsourcing these days. A couple of options are Waves, Resource Pro, and Patra. And of course, here at Kite Technology, we conduct several employee audits for agencies that have come to us that would like to have us audit their information as well. One, additional thing that we do in our agency is we also have offer training for the ability to audit your employees. So we assist you in creating the data audits, procedural audits, and things like that, and can help you create a flow for auditing if that's something that you would like to do within your agency. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how you may use a combination of auditing with reports and also auditing doing accounts. So you may have a situation where reports are going to give you a high-level overview of the information that you need to get out of Epic. There, however, is not a way to audit some of the information without putting your hands on the account physically and looking at the account to see what's going on. So we're going to talk through a couple of the reports that are available today that we generally recommend and find the best results by using a combination of reports and also account auditing to review. Account auditing is going to be different in that you'll actually be opening up certain accounts that the client service manager or account manager has been working on. You would want to, make sure you look at an account that they've completed processes on, whereas reports can be run on a regular basis. You can schedule those to be delivered regularly, and you can also schedule those to be delivered or quick reports directly to your employees as well. So with that, let's go into a little bit of discussion about reports for auditing your data. The first report that I'd like to talk about today is going to be your employee data audit report. So this is a report that we found to be very helpful to agencies who have maybe recently migrated to Epic, or even if you've been on Epic for a while and you're looking to optimize your efficiency in Epic. The employee data audit is based off of a book of business report. And basically what we do is take a lot of the different data fields that are available from that book of business report and dump those into an Excel spreadsheet. So in doing that, you're going to gather a lot of information at one time. You'll have a very big picture view of what's going on with that CSR and the data that's getting entered into the system. So this report is one that you're going to run really to increase your reporting accuracy. So when you're looking for things like commission, making sure servicing roles are correct, agency commission, producer broker commission, this report is going to help you gather a big picture view of what's going on. You may also use this report for post-migration. So if you feel that you've implemented some workflows and you've migrated over to Epic, and maybe everybody's just not filling that information in properly. Maybe you're having an issue with running your book of business report. This is a report that's going to help you identify some of those blanks and areas of opportunity to increase the accuracy of the information that's being put into Epic. I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots that we have for the employee data audit report. You'll see here that there's lots and lots of information in this report. However, I'm going to navigate over to Epic and also to a live version of this report as well. But basically, the report is going to be one that you'll be able to manipulate and sort and filter to find important information that needs to be addressed in your system. If you'll give me just a second, let me switch over to Epic and go through a little bit about how the report is set up, as well as a live version of the report and what you would get is when you run the report in Epic. So in Epic, I've already created the report. You'll see that I've placed it in the My Report section. A good tip here is any report that you're going to be creating and working on in Epic, always make a copy and put that over into your My Report. Good rule of thumb is, create it in My Report, edit it, manipulate it however you want, and then put a final copy in your main report section back over here on the left-hand side, so that if anyone else needs to use it in the future, they can do that as well. So for this reason, so for the purpose today, I have created this based off of a book of business policy report. So you see that over here on the right-hand side. And within the report, I have added a few data points for criteria here on the main screen. The way that this report is run is not how I would normally run it in Epic, because this is just a demo database, so I had to pull information based on what data we have in this demo. However, on a regular basis, in your policy effective and expiration date, you're going to want to run for a current book of business, you're going to want to run this effective date open to today's date, and then your expiration date would be tomorrow's date through open. And that'll give you an accurate picture of your full book of business as it is right now. Down here in line status, this is up to you. However, what I'm looking at right now is just your current active policies. So if you want to also capture information from maybe canceled policies within this term, you may find some information there as well that's valuable to you. But generally, you're going to run this based on a current book of business, active policies, active clients that are contracted policies. So that's really what you keep in mind as far as modifying your criteria here. You'll see I have account status is active, contracted for prospective or contracted. And then anything in reports under this parameter page is generally information that is added in addition to what comes with the main report. So that's just a little tip for reports training for you there. So if you need to add additional criteria, that criteria is going to be listed under that parameter page section here. So you'll see here I've added record listing. I only want to see, each time the policy is found. And then I also have some options for client service manager or client service rep. This would be based on who you are auditing. So if you're auditing a client service rep or account manager, whatever verbiage or terminology you've used to label your employees, that's the criteria that you're going to want to add down at the bottom of this report to gather the information. And you can run this based on individual employees, or you can run it for your entire book. Just depends on, obviously if you have a pretty large book, if you try to run it for everyone, you're going to have a situation where it'll probably time out on you. So I generally recommend running it per CSR or per account manager. The unique thing about this report is that it is run only in Excel. I go over to the layout and add all of the data fields that I want to review into the detail section of the layout. So you'll see by looking at this layout, if you have any experience with reports, this looks pretty pretty junked up. So all of these fields up here at the top, I really don't need. These are just the headers and labels. These are things that are beneficial to a PDF report. Um, but for the purpose of, just this report, the only thing that I'm really concerned about is the information here in the details section. So anything else that comes over, when you drag and drop a data field over, it's not really necessary. So anything else that's surrounding the details section isn't really going to apply to this report. So you'll see that I just dragged and dropped each field in here, and there's several fields. So when we run this report, you're going to see, just 1 second to get that to run. I have it set up to save automatically to my desktop, and I have already saved a copy here. So we'll just write over that so you can see what that looks like. Okay, and since I have the file open already, it is not going to let me save. So let me show you the actual report that was run. When you run the report, your columns may not be necessarily in the order that you want. So you may need to move those around and manipulate those a little bit. I will tell you that generally if you remove all of those data fields and add them in the order you'd like to see them in the Excel report, generally the report will run and show those fields in the order that you have added them. So some things that you may want to take a look at on the report are your headers, first of all. They're going to come over with just the basic information. So you can see here, I've changed this to client service rep, but when this came over, it just showed us code. So one thing you may want to do is go through your headers and make sure that they are understandable, especially if you're going to be presenting this to your employee. So if you're using this for, to show your employee, hey, here's what you're missing, you definitely want to make sure that you update that information so they understand the report. But you'll notice when you highlight over each header, it does give you a description of where the field is coming from. So this is how the report's going to run and come out. If you have, in this kind of a random order of the columns. I will show you, though, a copy of a final report that I have created. So this is a report that I've already manipulated and sorted and filtered out information based on what I'm trying to identify. So one thing that I'm looking at is maybe line status codes. So if I'm seeing some status codes that are incorrect, I've filtered out to see new quotes. I want to see basically have those new quotes just kind of been left out there to in in Foreverland, or are my employees actively closing out those quotes when they are not taken? So if I see a lot of NWQs here, that's something that I'm going to be concerned about. They haven't changed it to not issued and closed out that quote process, which is also why you'll see a lot of red over on this side. A couple of other areas that I look at are if they're missing a premium payable code or issuing code. Those are fields that you can require in Epic or desire if you'd like. But the reason for all of the red here is that a lot of these are new business quotes. So that tells me that the reason why there's no premium or commission or anything is because it's in quoting status and it just didn't get closed out. Some of the information over on the left-hand side, I do have the PRBR tab, so I need to know whether or not the producer or broker is getting entered at the PRBR tab. I need to know also maybe if their commission is getting entered properly. If you have commission agreements that don't have a 0%, then you would want to identify any that are 0%. So really what you're looking for when you're doing your sort and filtering is basically the information that may be incorrect in your system. If you are reporting, if you're trying to report on estimated commission and premium, you may want to filter out to all the blanks and find all of the areas that have a blank or a 0 for estimated premium and commission. Obviously, if you're trying to base your book of business on estimated premium and commission and there's nothing in there, that's going to be an issue. So you can kind of find if someone has an issue with entering that information in the system there. And then I also have over on the right-hand side the service summary information. So if you are having an issue getting folks to move policies throughout the stages, such as in process to submitted to issued. You can also manipulate the data here. Now, some of the information in this report, again, this is a very big picture report. Some of the information in this report I'm going to go over in a separate report. But if you need that big picture and you really want to just see, where's all the red at, where are my issues at, this is a good report for you to run and gather all that data and that information at one time. I certainly don't recommend running this regularly. Again, it's basically for cleanup, maybe kind of a touch base every now and then to see, once you have provided some coaching and implemented some procedures, this is a good one to look at and see, kind of where you stand as an agency or where your employee stands as their role is. So let's switch back over to our presentation. The next thing we're going to go over, and I did have a few screenshots in here, but live information is always better, so I hope you got a good picture of that in Epic. So the next report I want to go over is policies in process and submitted stage over 60 days. So as I mentioned just a minute ago, you do have the service summary row information on the report that we were just looking at. However, if you are specifically looking to find whether or not policies are being properly moved through the stages, you can set this report up and run this regularly. I do recommend running this report at least every month to find out whether or not your employees are following those the workflow of moving the policy or endorsement through the stages. We find that a lot of agencies don't fully understand what the stages mean or what they were intended to mean. So I wanted to go over quickly the detailed description of the stages as well. So in process, when you have a policy that's in process, that essentially means that you are still working on the application and nothing's gone out of the system. So in that phase, you can still edit the information, add information. You may be waiting on an updated driver's list from the client before you submit the application to the carrier. So in process is really the open application phase. You should just be working on at that point. Submitted stage is once you've sent it to the carrier or once you're ready to download the policy. That is when you should move the policy over into submitted stage. So whether it's an endorsement, cancellation, new policy renewal, whatever the case is, you're going to want to make sure that that policy gets moved into the submitted stage once it's left the agency. And then, of course, issued is going to be when you have received the policy or received the document from the carrier. That's when you're going to move the policy over into issued stage. And of course, not issued would be, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a new business quote, maybe that wasn't taken by the client, or maybe you had an endorsement that was initiated and something fell through and it didn't happen, maybe a purchase of a building or something to that effect. You want to make sure that you do a not issued situation for anything that does not get issued in the system. Migrated, of course, if any of you have migrated to Epic from another system, then you'll see the migrated stage is what the policy is in when it comes over from your prior database. So in that phase, it's basically locked down, so you can't edit the application, and you would need to do an endorse revise existing policy workflow to update the application. So ideally, policies should move through these phases, through these stages, I'm sorry. So if I'm looking at a report that says, my policy has been in process for over 60 days, my true concern there, and agencies, have had an issue with this, is that if it hasn't gone out of the agency, then we're way behind. If I've got a renewal that started 60 days ago and I never sent it out of the agency because the policy still says it's in process, that's a big red flag for me. Another situation that could occur if it's in process over 60 days is, it's always possible that your account manager has not moved the policy properly through the phases. It could be that, they didn't change the policy over to submitted stage once the policy was sent out of the agency. And again, that's a workflow discrepancy. So hopefully it's not the first situation where, someone dropped the ball completely and, you're worried about whether or not the renewal is being processed. But If that is the case, then you'll have this report to kind of back up and cover that information. So the report that was created that I'm going to switch over and show you real quick is based on an expiration report. Okay, so this one does take a little bit of additional manipulation. Um, I did add several options down here in the criteria, things like the CSR, line effective date, and then some of the service summary row information as well. There is a few details on the criteria here that you would want to exclude system date minus 60 days for date entered and effective date on your service summary row. You're actually going to include renewed expired policies because keep in mind this could be a renewal that is in process or in submitted stage. And generally, your line effective date is going to be minus 60 days I'm sorry, plus 60 days as well. But for the purpose of using this demo database, I'm going to be looking at all policies since there is not a lot of current information in this one. So over in the layout, you'll notice as well there is some additional manipulation to this report. Um, so we have client code, policy line, line status, policy number, PPE, and then your service summary information over here on the right-hand side. So this is information that's not normally on your expiration report, so you would need to add that in the layout of the report. Okay. And then back on the actual report, when I run that, you will see and I have this one set up to save as well. So I'm actually going to just do a print preview on this one. No need to save a lot of things to your desktop, right? Okay. And so on this report, you'll see I have it page breaking on each CSR. If you were going to create this and set it up as a quick report for your employees, which is a good way for them to identify issues that they may have on their own, then you can set this up to run in their quick report view and just set it up by each CSR. However, from a management standpoint, if you're auditing, you would certainly want to review by CSR. So as you scroll through, you could see, who has what issues here. Bill obviously is a little behind. He's got a lot of policies that were left in process and submitted stage. So at that point, you would want to identify those issues and address that with the CSR and find out really what the issue is there, whether it be a workflow situation or did they drop the ball and haven't addressed the renewal. Okay, and I know I mentioned renewal a lot of times in that, but it definitely applies to not only renewals, but it could be endorsements, new policies, cancellation, any of those different areas. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about now missed renewals report. So you have a couple of different options for missed renewals report. One option is going to be based on your agency procedures. So if you have a situation where you expect the renewal to be initiated or started in Epic at a certain point in time, whether that be 60 days out for marketing or 45 days out for marketing, by 30 days, generally, that would be a missed renewal. You can certainly set this report out further if you'd like, but at 30 days, the renewal should not be on your report. And normally agencies will gauge that by things like download. If a renewal hasn't occurred by 30 days and it's supposed to be downloaded, that could be, something could be going on there. Maybe the client decided not to renew. A couple of different things could happen there. So you definitely want to take a look at renewals that have not been renewed at least 30 days prior. Another report that we generally recommend that's very helpful to catching missed renewals is going to be your 10 days prior. Some agencies may find that, if they're concerned about renewals slipping through the cracks, they run the 10-day prior to expiration report, and basically that's going to tell you if there's anything that's really on fire. So hopefully you don't have a situation like that, but if you are concerned about anything falling through the cracks, maybe you've had a recent change in an employee, in your staff, and you're concerned about things happening, definitely run the 10 days prior. I also recommend running that on a weekly basis to make sure that nothing is missing. Several of these reports, I know I've mentioned it before, but many of these reports you can run again at a manager level or a leadership level and run it as a picture of the entire department or the entire agency to sort by the CSR. But you can also run these reports. It's also very helpful to have this set up for the CSR in their quick reports as well. A lot of CSRs, maybe they know that they're busy and they want to be able to double check that report and make sure that they've caught everything that's important to run. So you can definitely do it for both manager level and employee level. 7 days after expiration, again, hopefully you haven't missed renewals completely, but you may have something show up on that report as well. So if anybody has not renewed a policy, then you can run the report to run 7 days after expiration and show any policies that did not get renewed in the system. So this report is all based on an expiration report. Very simple to update in the system. You're basically just running it based on your current policy statuses and the CSR specifically, if you're going to run it by CSR, and then also your policy expiration date. You can just use those ranges, the 30 days, the 10 days, and the 7 days there. Okay. The next report I want to talk about is your late activity report. So in a situation where maybe you have some concerns about workload, or if you have a concern about an employee not getting their tasks and processes done on time, you may want to review the late activities report. So on that report, it's just a standard activity report. You can pull that out of the activity section over here in Epic, and I'll switch over and show you that. From there, over in, like I said, the activities, you're just going to have that standard activity report right here. It says right there, this is the default report. So I want to make sure I copy that over to my report. And I might call that late activities. You can also add comments down here for your reports as well if you need some instruction on what you've created after you've created several different reports. So in that report, you're basically just looking for the follow-up start date would be your system date. You could do in up to today. And then you can also do your who owner information. So if you wanted to, again, sort that out by CSR, you just want to run it for one person. Maybe you have concerns about just certain people, or you can run it for everyone and see what's going on by department. Either way, you want to make sure that folks are processing their activities on time. Another thing that you can do with this report is review the notes. So if you have a situation where folks are not entering their activity notes, you can also review whether or not they are entering notes on their activities for follow-up as well. Okay, so back over to our report. Let's talk about new and lost business. New and lost business reports are very useful to review for multiple things. So in a new business report, what you may be looking at is to find whether or not the policy status has been changed properly. I generally recommend running a new business report based on new and new business quote. Maybe the MKT status if you're using that for policies that are being marketed. What you want to see basically is that the policy was entered, and when it was bound, it was changed over to new. If it is still a new business quote and it's a new policy, you wrote it, obviously that information is incorrect. You may have also a situation where if you run your lost business report, you see a lot of those canceled general policy statuses. If your workflow in your agency is to change that canceled general status to a more appropriate status, such as maybe canceled for policy insurance request or canceled for non-pay, then that's definitely something that you're going to want to review on your lost business report. If you run a lost business report and you're not getting accurate information, then that's definitely where you'll find this information is on this report by including not only the policy statuses that you consider as lost business, but also the policy statuses that you would not necessarily consider a lost business. So, something, for instance, maybe a policy got canceled by download, but it was truly canceled and rewritten to another carrier. So at that point, you're thinking that it's canceled, but it really should have been canceled, rewritten. So those are some things that you're going to be looking at on those reports. Okay. The last one I want to mention is active accounts with no active policies. I noticed in some agencies, once they migrate over from whatever their previous database is to Epic, they don't really have a workflow in place to deactivate accounts that no longer have active policies on them. So this is a report to once you implement a workflow for the inactivating accounts, you can run this report on a regular basis to find out whether or not employees are um, properly inactivating accounts. Obviously, when you first run it, you may be a little overwhelmed if you have a situation where nobody's been inactivating accounts for a little while. Um, may run it more routinely until they get cleaned up. But once you've created this report, you can run it, maybe on a monthly basis. And I definitely recommend having this set up to allow your employees to do a quick report view as well. And that will allow them to look and hold themselves accountable, obviously, for any accounts that they may not have had a chance to inactivate. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about sample data audits. The data audit part is fairly simple and is very based on your workflows. So one thing I want to talk about is what a procedural audit is versus a data audit. A procedural audit is going to be based on your workflow itself, what procedures you've implemented in your agency, such as certain time frames that things need to be done within, naming conventions, attachment folders, items that are specific to your agency are what you're reviewing a lot of times in procedural audits. Okay, um, and then data audits are more based on the data, to be quite honest, in Epic that you have entered into Epic and what you expect to be entered into Epic. So that information could be E&O driven for accuracy on the policy and accuracy of data in the system, or it could be reports driven. What information do you need to make sure is entered on the policy and in the client so that you get appropriate reports. So the first example of a data audit that I want to go over is going to be where you review information to get accurate reports. So if you recall, in that first report that we looked at, we were looking for missing information that would negatively affect your report. So this is basically the same thing, but this is looking at it hands-on at an account level. And again, a hands-on account report or account audit is going to give you more information than just a regular report is going to give you. So for here, what we're looking at is things like the policy type, um, the status code, policy number, servicing roles, departments. All of this information needs to be correct in order for your system to work properly. If you put the wrong policy type in, you're not going to get the right commission agreement when you go to add a commission agreement. If your policy status is incorrect, you may not pull the correct commission agreement. It may not reflect properly on your new and lost business report. So several different fields within Epic need to be entered correctly just on a standard basis. So this is whether you've implemented workflows or whatever the case is. There are fields in Epic that just absolutely have to be completed properly in order for you to get appropriate and accurate report. You also have a data audit that reviews policy information. So in a report like this is something that maybe your E&O carrier is going to be more interested in. They want to know that what information you propose to the client is what was issued on the binder, and what was issued on the binder is what's issued on the policy. and what's issued on the policy is what you put into Epic. So you will need to compare all of those various details in order to in order to find whether or not the information is accurate. If you proposed $1 million in a commercial umbrella, but it was issued at only 500,000, whatever the case is, that's information that you're going to find only by reviewing the account hands-on. And we have, that's one thing that we find a lot in our employee audits is, there are discrepancies between basically what was issued on the policy a lot of times is different from what's been entered into Epic. So, it could be a case that the policy renewed, carrier updated some information, and then that information didn't get relayed into Epic. So maybe when the employee received that policy, they just said, "Yep, it's good. Send it on to the client," and you can tell then at that point that they really didn't compare and check the information to make sure that it was accurate. I've also had other agencies have concerns about binders being issued with incorrect limits or incorrect coverages. So at that point, they ask that we audit whether or not when the binder was issued from the carrier, did that binder get issued with what was proposed or the quote, what was quoted on the quote that they provided. So just a few examples of how, the information that is entered in Epic is really important to review, whether it's the policy proposal and the Epic application itself. Okay. You also have a couple other examples here. I have examples of a data audit. This is just a different format of the information that we were talking about earlier and the information that needs to be entered for your reporting purposes. A good rule of thumb if you're deciding to create an audit for your agency is to, kind of structure it around the areas of Epic. So when you're looking over on the left-hand side in your navigation panel, you're going to see account detail, contacts, opportunities, maybe contracts if you're using those, policies. So it's a good idea to address your audit sections and your audit questions by structuring around those sections of Epic. So if you know, let's talk about policies. What do we want to make sure is entered correctly in policies? If I'm looking at contacts, do I want to make sure that I have a primary and main contact? Do I want to make sure that they have a formal and informal name entered? Things that are important to you and what you're needing to happen in the system are important questions to ask on your data audit. Okay. Then you have a procedural audit as well, procedural/workflow auditing, a couple of different things you can call this. This is going to be based solely on your agency procedures. Those procedures that are going to be different from your agency to another agency. Maybe you have some of the same best practices, but generally this is going to be something that's specific to your agency. So if you've decided that, a renewal should be initiated and started at 120 days out, that's going to be something specific to your agency. You're going to need to put your hands on the account and review the account in detail to find whether or not your account manager or CSR has initiated that renewal that 120 days out. Same thing for 90 days and 60 days. If you expect a quote to go out at 60 days and that's not happening, then that's something that you're going to want to audit on the account. Most of these areas are audited once you have standardized the workflows. This is something that you simply cannot audit unless you have some sort of workflow in place. Obviously, if you expect someone to audit, or I'm sorry, to quote at 60 days out, you have to have that documented somewhere. So it's really important to keep in mind that you can only do this type of audit, a workflow or a procedural audit, once you have a standardized procedure and workflow in place. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Kelly now, and she's going to talk a little bit about how you would get started with doing audits. So Kelly, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Lauren. So a lot of material was covered today, and I'm sure some of you may be thinking, where do I start? Where do I go from here? Before you can begin incorporating auditing within your agency, there's a few procedures that first need to be in place. You want to have created or have standardized your agency workflows. There should be set procedures on how your agency operates within Epic to act as a guide for your employees. After that, those workflows need to be implemented with training provided so your employees understand them. And then they need to be enforced. And this is done through auditing and reports. So to get started, you will need to decide if you will be auditing internally or hiring an outside source. Do you have the resources to do it yourself? As mentioned earlier, examples of internal resources would be an agency trainer, peer-to-peer, a team leader, or maybe a member of management. And the outside resources to audit would be, you can have Patra, Resource Pro, or even us, Kite Technology. Next, you will want to have a plan of action. What are you going to do with this information? Will it be used for data integrity purposes? Maybe you want to see if the data is consistently getting entered into the system, or maybe you want to see if there needs to be some cleanup after migration. Would you be using these for additional training, employee reviews, or maybe workflow changes? In order for this data to be useful for you, you will need to have a plan of what you will do with the results. And then determine what type of audits you want to implement. Will you be running reports? Will you be doing data audits, procedural audits, or will you be a rock star and do a combination of all three? And then finally, communicate with your employees. It is important to let them know about the benefits of implementing auditing and how it can improve efficiency in workflows. For example, you may find an instance where a workflow is consistently not being followed. Auditing will help you gauge if the issue is with the workflow itself or simply if more training needs to be provided. As we have shared, there are multiple benefits for auditing within your agency. We hope that today's webinar has provided a good overview of what you can accomplish by taking advantage of the resources within Applied Epic. In the few minutes we have left, let's just review some questions that have been sent in. Question 1 is, what is the biggest inconsistency you tend to find in a data or procedural audit? And for me, in my experience, the biggest inconsistency is I find how attachments are labeled. When we are writing workflows or providing training, we always stress the importance of labeling attachments. This is not only for your benefit as the CSR or account manager, but for anyone who may be covering your desk while you're out of the office. It makes finding information a lot easier and the account looks a lot cleaner and organized. And question number 2, out of all of the reports you mentioned, are there any that you feel are more important or should be implemented more than others? And Lauren, what do you think about that one?
Well, that's a good question, Kelly. Honestly, all of the reports are generally important to running your business efficiently, and making sure the information is getting input properly into the system. However, if I had to choose a few, I would definitely recommend and say that the most valuable to agencies that we've worked with are going to be those missed renewal reports. You want to make sure that those renewals are being started proactively and not reactively in your system. And you want to make sure that you're not missing renewals. That's one I've heard horror stories from agencies that have had situations where renewal didn't occur, just it didn't happen at all. Somehow completely got missed, and that ended up badly with E&O claims. Claims happening after that renewal should have been issued. So those are definitely really important reports to run. And of course, anything that is going to affect your book of business report. So making sure that your new and lost business reports are up to date, making sure those policy statuses are correct, are also really important to the business, because as a whole, you need to be able to report on what premium you've got coming in. And if your policy statuses are not correct, then you're unable to manage that information. And then also, like I said, making sure that things are being done and moved along in the system properly. You can use those in process and submitted stage reports. So definitely would say those are some of the top reports that I've seen be very helpful and beneficial to the agencies that we've worked with.
Great. And then finally, our last question, how should I structure my own audit report if I were to create one?
Also a good question. I did mention a little bit earlier about how you could structure that based on the sections in Epic. So certainly, take a look at the areas of Epic over in your navigation panel. Maybe start with the account detail, contacts, policies. Policies is going to be a really important area to review, especially if you're doing those workflow and data audits. So definitely, I would say structure it based. Use the structure that is in existence already, and try to use those sections of Epic there on the left-hand side in the client screen.
Great. Well, it looks like that is all the questions we have time for today. If we didn't get to your question, or if you have additional ones that come up about today's topic, please feel free to reach out to us. If you would like to learn more about Kite-Tech's IT and consulting services, please feel free to reach out using any of the ways listed here. We would be happy to set up a complimentary consultation to talk with you about your technology or consulting needs. Thank you again for spending the time with us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.